A new Koch poll shows that most Americans are generally against the United States going to war with Russia if Russia were to invade Ukraine, and would prefer the focus to be on domestic issues over foreign issues right now. Joining us for more is the Vice President of Research and Policy at the Charles Koch Institute, Will Ruger. Great to have you on the show this morning. Happy New Year to you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm on Team Brady there, but I see your point about Rodgers.
So selfishly, I'm from New England, so I'm on Team Brady always, even though he's in Tampa right now. This year, I'm kind of on Team Belichick because I think that would be a good story if they were to meet in the Super Bowl. But that's a topic for another morning. I want to talk about this new Koch poll. Americans right now, and this kind of reminds me of isolationism, late 1930s. Americans don't want war with Russia or China. We've got enough problems here domestically in the United States. What'd you make of this poll, and maybe more importantly, what it says about where the American people are right now?
Well, I think it shows that Americans are wary of war after 20 years fighting these forever wars. That, fortunately, we've ended one of these when President Trump signed the Doha Agreement, and then we carried that out this past year. So I think it shows Americans wary. One thing I would highlight here is that, unlike the threat of Nazi Germany to the United States when the United States eventually did need to engage, this is a case where America's national interests are not at threat. Ukraine is not a critical state for America's safety or its prosperity. It's not a very wealthy state. The United States doesn't have a lot of trade with it. And it's not strategically located in a way that the United Kingdom and France were in the 1930s. So I think the comparison is not apt here. I think the key thing is to think about the realism of the American public here. They look at this situation and they say, look, we have a lot of challenges here at home. Why do we want to think about fighting for a country that isn't really geostrategically important? And I think that's what they've said here in this poll, because they've also talked about the importance of burden sharing. We've also seen Americans thinking that, the United States is perhaps overextended abroad while problems here at home have festered.
Yeah, that's a good point, Will. I guess my point was more just back to that notion of if you give a mouse a cookie. You might say the same thing about Poland back in the late 1930s, but we saw what happened in 2014 with Crimea. Vladimir Putin is somebody that wants Ukraine. We know that. And I'm not so sure it's a good thing for the U.S. not to have some involvement. So let's broaden it out. What does this mean not only for the U.S., but for NATO as well if Russia does move on Ukraine, say, after the Beijing Olympics?
Well, I think one important point to note is that Ukraine is not part of NATO. And so if the United States refuses to defend Ukraine, it's not violating any of its agreements. And I think that our commitment to, say, Germany or Poland or the United Kingdom, members of NATO, is still very strong. And so I don't think that this would embolden Putin to move forward, not to mention the fact that Russia's ability to project power beyond its immediate neighbors is very limited, especially compared to the United States, which we saw over the last 20 years, where the United States can send forces quite broadly around the globe on a moment's notice. So I'm not worried about the safety of our NATO allies here related to Russia, especially because Russia isn't the Soviet Union in terms of its strength, right?
Right.
It only spends about $60 billion a year on its military. That compares to the United States spending $770 billion every year. The United States has global power projection. So we're a very safe country, and our allies are wealthy and populous as well. So I think that Russia is overstated as a threat to the United States. Now, is it a threat to Ukraine? Absolutely. But the question there is then, is it in our interest to get more deeply involved? And do we actually potentially encourage Ukraine to take actions that could lead to greater conflict there by suggesting things that we might not live up to, right? If the Biden administration says that
Will Ruger, we have to leave it there. We're tight on time. Sure. Come back and see us. There's a lot more to unpack when it comes to this issue, and it's not going away. Will Ruger, thanks so much for your expertise. We appreciate it. Good to see you.